everyone from the Shaving Cadre. This is CB Lindsay. Hope everyone's doing well today. I know that there's been a few questions over the weekend or maybe last week about honing. Some people having some difficulty getting their razors honed proper. And I thought I'd share some of the secrets that helped me be better at honing. I still have my own failures, but it's my life changed once I learned these few secrets. I learned them from watching the internet, going to YouTube, finding different people showing different pieces, put it all together. So none of the stuff that I'm saying here today is unique to me. I didn't make any of it up. It's not because I'm super smart. I'm smart enough to look at other people and steal their ideas. One person I'm sure I stole plenty of ideas from was Dr. Matt, because it was one of his videos that while watching, I watched several of his videos and went to the stones and did the work and then end up with shave ready or not shave ready. But then one day I'm watching one of his videos and it clicked. So I give him credit for showing me in a different way so that it clicked. So what is it that I learned? Well, first, the question, I guess, that I was asking is, what is the bevel and how do I know that it's set? What does it look like when it's set? Go Google that, and you'll see on the forums plenty of people will tell you, oh, it'll shave arm hair when it's set. Yep, losing some arm hair there. It'll slice a cherry tomato. Well, that tells me something that about what it'll do when it's set, but what does it look like? Well, the reason I kept asking the question and not getting any answers is it's not really easy to describe what it looks like, and it really doesn't matter what it looks like so much as long as you get it there. So, what is the bevel? The bevel is basically the point at which the metal comes to an apex, the shaving edge. So the bevel is the plane that connects. Okay. In this illustration, you have a grind that, if you were to extend it all the way out, would connect, and that would make it more like a shaving razor blade. In this case, this is more like a knife blade. Okay, you have the grind of the blade, or a kitchen knife, and then you have a bevel put into the end. Okay, so that's kind of what I had in my mind all along. If you've ever sharpened a kitchen knife or a pocket knife, you know that you have to have some finesse doing it. It's not impossible, but there's tools that help you do the proper angle. Well, razors are built with something that makes them very valuable, and that spine is proportionally designed to be the right width to the blade width, so that you get a shaving angle here. Shaving angle, everyone will tell you they have different angles. Again, Google it and you'll get different answers. I've shaved with angles as acute as 14. It feels pretty dangerous at that point, and I think I've done up all the way at 24 degrees, it means it removes hair. It doesn't mean it's comfortable. So here's a graphic of a razor. The one I showed you was more of a wedge. This one would be a hollow ground razor. You have a spine, you have the hollowed out blade, but had it not been hollowed out, you'd have the green line. In this case, just like here, imagine we're now talking only down there, one triangle. Okay? This becomes essentially the bevel width. Okay? You have when we talk about measuring, this is important, but this is a razor. Top of the spine, the rounded part of the spine, isn't important. What is important is where it touches the stone. So between where it touches the stone and where it touches the stone down here, this is the geometry that we're looking for. I have a graphic or something that'll help us see that a little bit better, and I hope it helps you too. I made my mock-up of a razor, or of a blade anyway. So we're looking at a blade like that. Okay. In this case, kind of a wedge. In this case, something of a hollow. Pay no attention to the fact that it's not actually properly angled. but I tried to make it in a proportion where you could see the width to length. This gives us about a 24, would have given us anyway about a 24 degree angle down here if it were proportionally this way. Put this on a hone, flat, and you can see there's part that touches. The spine is on there the whole way. There's part that touches. And for this, I'm liking this because you can kind of see that there's a rounded edge that isn't sharp. If we do this enough, we're going to get an apex here. What you do to one side, you do to the other, and you just do even, do this evenly. And in theory, if you did 100 each direction, 100 each direction, 100 each direction, you just kept whatever you did on one side, you did on the other, you'd eventually get to a peak, a clean peak, a clean bevel. Okay? So remember, with the razor, what is the bevel? It's the whole darn thing from here to there. Okay? It's the green line. It's not just the micro piece down here at the bottom. It's the whole razor. So the whole razor is the bevel. That's the part that needed to click for me. Okay? It's there, it's obvious, but what does the bevel look like? That's what the bevel looks like right there. Okay? Now how do you get, what does it mean to set a clean bevel? Or set the bevel? Well, setting the bevel is essentially rubbing it on steel until this point becomes as fine as possible. Okay? So I've just by way of a demo, we rub and we rub and we rub. Think of this as if it's very micro. These are nanometers perhaps. Okay, and you rub and eventually you're going to get this part rubbed off. Okay, and you can see that I had to rub through all of that to get to there. Okay, and I'm doing it a little bit at a time. A little bit at a time, and it may take, if these were microns, this could be done in 5 minutes or less, depending on diamond plate razor, 600 grit, whatever it is. You're going to wear through that. You're going to do some wear on the spine, but this is proportionally, it's such a small amount of steel. What you want to also notice is, if I put too much pressure on it, it'll flex, and it touches in a different spot. So pressure isn't bad, except that you need to do pressure on the other side so that you get proportionally the same result. Okay? Now, if you do too much pressure, it's, like I say, it's not bad. I know that I use too much pressure, and I know that I get pretty sharp edges. But if you get use too much pressure, one of the things that you end up with is a very fine piece of steel. You push, 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 and eventually you've worn down as much as what you can, but this last piece just can't, it's not making enough contact. You're pushing and it flexes up. So you end up with, I don't know if this is what technically would be a fin edge or a wire edge, but I'll call it a fin edge. And if you do the same thing, it's not as simple as turning the razor over. You're getting this little fine piece that comes out the middle, and it's not coming off. Simple way to fix that, 2 ways. One, take it to the strops. Go to a nice canvas strop it off. It'll basically, it's by stropping, it's going to do this to it until it kind of breaks off. Then you can go back to the stones and clean things up. What I've learned over time, though, is if you end up with this little piece of artifact there, you might have a bevel that is very near perfect, but it's masked by this. So you go and you do your arm hair test or your cherry tomato test, and you may get differing results. It could be that this piece here is sharp enough to cut through a cherry tomato skin, but behind here is nothing useful. So you might think you've gotten somewhere, and then you go to another stone, and you eventually get it cleaned up, and all you've really done is taken off that wiry fin, and now there's nothing sharp behind here. So you go back to the test, and what happened? I ruined my edge. Well, no, you probably didn't have an edge to begin with, because once you set that bevel, once you get it where you have here to here, all coming together in the finest point possible, the bevel is set. From that point on, everything that you do is, as long as you keep it proportionally, is only going to refine that very edge. And that's the idea of going from, if you did 600 grit, to really do some heavy work, up to 1,000, whatever it is. Most people start at about 1,000 grit. But if you go finer and finer grit, what you're working on doing is trying to get that very apex more and more refined. It can only be as refined as the grit that you're using. I made a little graphic here. We'll use this. Neat trick with Apple is it's showing me everything in reverse, but when I play the video, it's going to be in the right direction, so I'm looking at my stuff reverse here. This is just an example of like a 600 grit apex versus a 1,000 grit apex. What I did is I used a Sharpie and a gel pen. The Sharpie only allows me to get such a sharp, I can only graphically draw a certain sharpness because the Sharpie will only give me such a fine point. Whereas a finer grit gel pen, I can draw a much sharper apex. Now if I had a very fine tip fountain pen here, I might be able to get an even sharper apex. So that's kind of a good illustration of why you need to go from one grit to another. You can get the bevel's done. Once you have a bevel, it is shaveable. It can, that's what a lot of the pocket knives, people go, oh, look at how sharp, sharp my pocket knife is, it shaves hair. Well, yeah, it can shave hair, but can it shave hair comfortably enough to where you'll sit still while it's happening? Well, a lot of people will, you can shave off 1,000 grit. You can, but can you do it comfortably? I don't know how far up you need to go, 8,000, 12,000, some super magical thing. I like to clean up my edges on a 0.1 micron diamond paste. So in theory, if I'm using 0.1 micron diamond paste, I'm able to get an edge that is much smaller than if I were using the finest cuticle that I could. So what does a bevel, what is the bevel? The bevel's the whole darn thing. Don't try to think of it being down here. That was the part that kind of tripped me up. You're not going to be able to see as well as what you should here, but you'll get the picture. There's a reflection in the blade. You can see in the reflection at the top of the spine. You can almost read what's on the paper below. There's a mirror reflection. At the very bottom, you can almost read what's below. There's a number 14 there on the calendar. And there's words there, goals, okay? Well, it's goals in reverse. I don't know if you can see that, but nonetheless, mirror edge, mirror edge. That's the result of it touching the hone and being worked through a very fine process. Forever, I thought the mirror edge down here, that's the bevel. Okay, you can have a mirror edge that doesn't meet in a sharp peak. So you can have a perfectly mirrored edge on both sides and not have it come together in an apex. So mirror doesn't mean anything, but once you've got a bevel, and if you were able to refine it to the mirror edge, you're also doing the same thing at the very edge. Okay. When people are looking into the loop, it is possible to see more of a reflection. You see a very straight line reflection. You can look at it with it angled ever so slightly. You can look straight on. If you're looking straight on, sometimes you see glints of reflection if there's a catch in it or something. But with high enough magnification, it doesn't take a lot, maybe 40 or 60 times. You can see when an edge isn't coming, even though there's an apex, there's pieces of that apex missing. Let's see if this is, I'll show. A clean bevel obviously would be a straight line. Okay, that's the very apex. Okay. You can have a not clean bevel that for all purposes is a straight line with some piece missing somehow or another. This type of unclean bevel will often cut a cherry tomato, definitely shave arm hair, and it might even shave your face pretty comfortably. But these little missing pieces, I don't know if some people desire this kind of thing, sawtooth type of thing, but that's not a clean bevel. And what that ends up doing is it ends up breaking down over time much faster. So if you set a clean bevel and you strop in between and such, you'll have a razor that stays sharp for a long time. You set one that's got a lot of little nooks and crannies built into it. It's not a set bevel, but if that's what you're going to call it, it's going to be very unclean. The edge is going to be very unclean, and it's going to break down over time. So I think that we've covered the things that are most important. I'll wrap up with just a couple of tips and tricks. Now that you understand what the bevel is and the part, how you're working it, you're using the spine as support to work this edge. Okay, so how can you set it? There are a couple of ways to do it. One is the burr method. You work this side long, over and over and over and over and over again until it's pushed up the steel. A burr, that's a burr. It's pushed up the steel. And if you run your finger from the opposite side, you can actually feel it, because it's more like a burr, something like that, where it's kind of pushed it back. Okay, and then you flip it over. And if you did 1,000 this way, you're going to do 1,000 this way until you feel a burr on this side. Okay? And in theory, what you've done, if you do an equal amount, is you've worn that down until you've worn this away until you have a clean edge to work from. Now this might be the bevel that now from here you might do 20, 25, 5, whatever it is, to get this finer and finer and finer. But doing a burr might be just to break that part off. Okay. So how do you get that honing done? 3 things. First, you have to make sure your hone that you're using is flat. Flat, flat, dead flat. Okay. There are ways to hone with a convex, what's slightly rounded hone, and it's not any easier or harder. It's just that it requires you to do different moves. So flat, flat, flat. Okay. In this case, flat, flat, flat. Okay. All the way flat. Don't assume that your hone stays flat. If you hone a lot, take it back to the little flattening lapping plate that you use and get it flat. You can look up how to do that. I won't do that. Second is, before you get frustrated with the razor, do what's called a tap and wobble test. Again, Dr. Matt references this, Slash McCoy references this. I'm sure somebody else has referenced it. It's an obvious one. We assume that this razor that was made is all straight, everything geometrically straight. We assume that when we have a triangle, it's perfect the whole way. It may not be. This blade is perfectly flat, so if I try to do a tap and wobble, it's not going to work. But effectively, what a tap and wobble is this. This is not. You can see I made it purposely so that it wouldn't be. This side is heavier or higher than the other, and you can see. Well, you won't go see that. Anyhow, tap and wobble. That's where you lay this down flat on a surface. If it's warped, one edge will wobble when you tap the corners. So you get this nice little, just check your razor before you set out to hone. Super fast, lay it on a hard flat surface. Make sure that you've dropped, that you've taken this part off the surface so that you're not accidentally just riding up on this. Lay it flat. If it sits flat, it shouldn't wobble at all when you touch any of the corners. Flip it over, do the same. It's not uncommon for one side to lay perfect flat, the other one not. If it doesn't pass that tap and wobble test, it just means you have some geometry issues that you're going to have to address. Again, different video. The other thing that I like to do, because tap and wobble is something that we don't necessarily do, Sharpie. Take a Sharpie before you get started, while you're getting everything ready, and run it down the spine. Okay. If there's some flat spots on the spine, make sure you color them all in. Okay, so we've got the spine. Do the same thing to the edge. Okay. So now we have all the way at the edge on the spine. Okay. Now, That doesn't magically sharpen things, but it tells us when we do set out to move this thing on the hone, as I do it, it's going to wear off. You can sort of see it now. It's going to wear off some of the Sharpie. You do 10 strokes each direction, no pressure necessary, just whatever pressure you use, and you'll see it's either taking the Sharpie off evenly, here and here, or it's taking it off here but nothing's come off over here. What does that mean? High spot, low spot, or a warp. But what you want to do is you want to do that Sharpie and do your regular strokes. That'll tell you if your regular strokes are hitting everything. You can then adjust your stroke so you have a different angle of approach. Some people come straight and do this like this. Well, if you need to angle it differently so that you can get better contact, the Sharpie will tell you. Okay, so Sharpie is, if you're ever against a wall and you can't figure it out, bust out the Sharpie and see where it's touching. Strop it first, bust out the Sharpie, put it on, and see, is it touching everywhere evenly. And then again, different video, different topic, how to go about fixing that. And the last thing that I suggest before you ever get started, it's hard to do because this razor here, it's actually quite well honed. It's ready to go until I've messed with it. But even now, it'll pop arm hairs. You got to dull that edge. Now, some people tell you to take it, run across a glass. Like you're just setting it, just doing this. I actually like to take the corner of the stone. You have a stone like this. I like to run it like that across the corner, or across the edge, the very fine edge. And again, you're not a lot of pressure. The reason I like to do it on the side is because it keeps me from doing any pressure. I'm just making contact. I read somewhere, saw somewhere, someone referenced this as being called the joining maneuver. By doing that through a stone, you're sort of you're not only dulling the edge, but you're not causing it to roll over. If you run it on a glass, you're kind of rolling the edge one way or the other. The joining, you're just kind of ripping it off, so you're not creating an abnormality. Also, it takes a problem razor, strips it down, and makes it easy. Don't know what to tell you. If you're having problems, do that joining maneuver. Put your Sharpie on it, go to a flat stone, and see where it's touching and go to town. So I hope that helps. I know that it helped me to see a graphic. If you're having problems, create yourself a little blade, a little razor. It can be as simple as a folder that you've cut. Say, okay, so what is, if I do this, if it's wobbling this direction, what's touching, what's not? Make it big so you can touch and feel the problem and see how it would work. Okay, that helped me immensely because it was like you're talking magic down here at the tips. It's super sharp and I can't see it. Nothing tells me that it's sharp or that I can see it. So, hope that helps the Cadre. Obviously, if you need anything else, check us out, theshavingcadre.com. Ask questions. There's a lot of people there that know what they're doing. And if I can help, I'll pipe in. Dave, he's fantastic at honing.